Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here to facilitate a conversation with my good friend and buddy, Peter Scalzo, who is on his 20-year cancer journey. And today he has invited a special guest into our studio. And this special guest is known by both of us as Johnny D, and it's John D. Pasquale, but everybody who knows him well affectionately calls him Johnny D. And John's been a mentor for both Peter and I, and great friend for, I'm going to say, going on 20 years for me, but longer for you probably. I don't even know how long for you.
Mm-hmm. It has been long.
How long have you guys been?
Maybe 40.
Yeah, been a long time.
That's because they're both boomers. They could actually have that kind of time, but I, not being a boomer, will not be able to.
I'm the tail end of the boom. So.
You are, yeah.
Yeah.
This man is solidly a boomer, and so he has wisdom. Even though he was denied it early, he was trying to call it a different generation. That was hilarious.
Yes.
So, and the reason why John's in studio is not just because he's a friend and mentor, but he's been on a wild journey, and it's been a 50-month long experience that as a boomer, you kind of have an idea. I won't give his exact age, but you kind of get the area of his life where he's not in his prime working years of life, but he's in I'm going to call him his prime wisdom years.
Well, we can say he has a big B-Day coming up this year.
He does have a big B-Day. I'll just leave it that way, though. Yeah.
You don't want to say what it is?
Well, if
Johnny D probably wouldn't mind.
I don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this July I'll be 80.
80, the big 80. I know, it doesn't look like it.
Wow.
No, that's
He's
crazy.
amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And to put into context, broad brushwise, what got me on this journey was when I was 30, I had an emotional breakdown. So it's 50 years from being made aware that I had some kind of issue that I really had to deal with.
Yeah. That's, one of the things that's interesting is why this 50-month journey plays out, I think is important, is that you had done a lot of work in recovery and in just your own spiritual journey to be what I would call a high functioning, high output, a leader in the church, a leader in your job roles back, when you were working in industry. And I think my guess is that you thought you were on a path that was pretty well understood in your mind about what it may look like for the next, however many years of your life that you had left. And all of a sudden, this 50-month journey came out of nowhere, I think. But would you share, kind of set us up a little bit of, where you're at in the journey, the things that you're involved with, and all of a sudden you have what we're going to talk about today, just a little bit about your story and take us into that.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good word, high functioning. Coming to Christ at 32, I became a Christian zealot and put me on the performance for about a long time. But in 1984, I realized that church wasn't enough, and I was introduced to the 12-step program through a friend because I was going through a transition at work. And so from 1984, I've been involved with AA and then eventually EA, Emotions Anonymous, that deals with anxiety and depression. And for the next 20-some years, being faithful to that, even starting groups. And then at Walnut Hill, helping to bring in Celebrate Recovery. So when I was 75, which is 5 years ago, you're exactly right. I thought that all the difficult things that I had to work through, I had to overcome, that now it was just going to be coasting. But on February 23rd of 2021, I woke up not able to breathe. And it took me about an hour to reoxygenate myself, And for the next 3 days, I couldn't sleep. My body would go into spasms because the automatic breathing system, something happened to it, which brought on a lot of anxiety. And the anxiety ultimately led to, depression. And I didn't know what happened. It just was a shock. And I used all the tools that I knew how to use, but the anxiety continued for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, more than I had ever had happen before. And so after, seeing a doctor, getting to a specialist, getting some medication, it helped a little bit, but it took a while before the anxiety and depression passed. Think about 2 months. And thinking I was out of the woods, that now I could now just go back, I had about 30 days of normalcy, and the anxiety and depression hit again. And over the last 50 months, this April will be 50 months of that cycle happening, where I'd have 1 or 4 weeks to 5 weeks of feeling pretty good, and then all of a sudden 6 or 7 weeks of depression and anxiety. There were moments where I would, more than just one moment, but many moments, where the emotional intensity was so painful, I cried out to God to take me. And obviously I'm here, so he didn't do that. But the journey put me into places that I normally wouldn't go to, and to talk to people, and to, get a counselor that I could see, get a psychiatrist that could help me with medication. And then more recently, going to an outpatient facility at Danbury Hospital for a 30-day intensive DBT training on how to manage emotional regulation. And that's where I am today. I'm on my 18th day since the last downward turn. And the last downward turn ended on March 22nd. But on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, was the worst day I had in the last 50 months. And that brings me up to right today. So that's just the broad brush.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. I just want to contribute that. So Johnny D and I have had, as we said, a very long relationship. He's one of the people mentioned in my book. There's 3 individuals who really came alongside of me and during my journey, my health journey, and Johnny D's one of them. And I have traveled with him through the last 50 months, and we talk just about every day. There are a few days that we've missed, and I've been over to his house before during the down periods. And I was pretty much a newbie to severe depression like that. And I watched him barely able to function, barely able to get up in the morning and shave and do those things, just to put one foot in front of the other. We've had many frank discussions when he's in the down periods, the down times. And when it's a downtime, it is a downtime, and very desperate, very dark. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just a simple cyclical depression kind of thing. It's been a very severe, very serious depression and time that he has gone through. So,
to even address that, out of the 20 or so antidepressant medicines, none of them worked on me. My body is resistant to that. So I'm trying something new. And that seems to, hopefully, we'll see how helpful that'll be in the next downward cycle.
Yeah, I want to highlight something that you were just talking about, Peter, because we've talked about a lot of times. A while back, we did a segment on the podcast where we went through your journal, and you had what I would think is, and you can confirm this, your darkest night of the soul, and that's when you had finished this major surgery, and you basically cut yourself out from the outside world. And it was this guy here who was praying upstairs at his house and asking God, hey, what does Peter need? Or, he got the message from you that it's dark and getting darker. And you took time to seek God's counsel, I guess, John, in this moment in time. And God inspired you, and you can rephrase that word. I don't want to put the wrong words on it, to bring Peter a blank journal. And even though Peter was saying no visitors, you went anyway, and you put it on his chest, and eventually you left Peter there with that journal. And the reason why to me this is important is one of the reasons why I think you've been such a good mentor for both of us is that you had in your spiritual maturity come to a place where you were listening closely to God, that you wanted to be a close listener to God, that you wanted to be at the center of his will as his heart. And I think people that were around you would know that about you. And so I'm curious, as you went through this experience now, though, in some ways, did you feel like you had lost that? And correct anything about the story that I just told. I'm actually not trying to be too prescriptive, but just your perspective. I know you remember that moment with Peter and his cancer journey, and you're someone who has spoken a lot of words into my own life and my own journey that if it weren't for your journey, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I would have left a long time ago. And so it was many of your words of encouragement that gave me the courage to take the next day. And so God has used you in mighty ways in both Peter and I's life. And so we saw that, see that, know that. And then here you are, you're in your own battle now. How did you think and feel about that? And did it change your perspective about where you had been and what was real?
Well, going back to the journal, I was walking out of the movie theater with my wife on a Saturday when I got the text from Pete. And I went home and I got to the second floor and got on my knees and said to God, basically, I didn't know what to do or what to tell or what to say to this man who probably is dying. And it was very distinctly, I just heard in my heart, bring him a journal. And so I have special fine felt tip pens. So I made sure I had a fine felt tip pen with the journal. And the next morning, which was Sunday, I drove down to New York City, went inside his room, and I put it on his chest, and I said, "This is for you. Write about it." And then I left. And that was how that started. Yeah, in the last 50 months, when the first wave of anxiety and the breathing problem and the depression came in, it was unimaginable. I was in total shock that I was at that place. As a matter of fact, I had moved into a beautiful lake home. I had my grandkids. I was in the prime of being used, and now this was actually freezing me, making me totally incapable of doing anything. I had to leave 4 ministries I was involved in at the Landing and CR and a few other things. And it just floored me. And also with my wife, because she had been with me in past little episodes, but nothing like this. So that I tried everything, went to prayer meetings, had people pray over me. All the things that I know from my recovery, I put into practice, but there was no relief. And at that time, God seemed more than silent. He felt not hearing me, particularly when the emotional pain was really high. He was silent. Yeah.
Something that we had talked about a bunch for cancer patients is shift in identity. And the moment someone becomes or is diagnosed with cancer, they become a cancer patient. And Peter's talked a lot of times about this identity shift that happens for us. And so we've talked about on this podcast is something that you have to journey through. And so I want to parallel that with your experience, if you're willing to. And that is what you've described is a mental illness. Mm-hmm. And mental illnesses have stigma. And the fact that a mental illness is taking you out of your ministry activities has put a strain on the relationships you have in normal everyday life, whether it be with your spouse, your kids, the people that you relate to the most. And so can you just journey for a second with just the shift in identity from being high energy, high functioning, hard charging Johnny, the guy that most of us knew that was maybe at times the biggest personality in the room for certain situations. Is that a fair statement, Peter?
Yeah.
To John D. Struggling with a mental illness. How did that come to you? And is it an identity that you have wrestled with? And just to hear a bit about your thoughts in that space, if you're willing to, yeah.
Sure. The first year, I really believed, even to take a step back when this happened, I remember saying to the Lord, I could handle 4 or 5 days or a week of this. And 4 or 5 days in a week, it wasn't away. So it started to bring me back to what does it really look like to live one day at a time? And what does it really look like not to have my performance aspect of my life define me? And that's where my identity was. And that was probably the hardest thing for my sons and my wife to see me start to almost shrivel up. It was hard for me with lots of conversations with God about how could this happen when there's so many needs and I feel so disabled,
Yeah.
Yeah. It became gradual, though, as each of the months turned into years. I realized that this could be a cycle. My wife said, why don't you accept the fact that this could be continual and maybe try to find out how do you live in the downtime? And about a year ago, or maybe 15 months ago, is when I started to accept the fact that that this could be a continuation and have radical acceptance of this is the way it's going to be, and how do I function and regulate my emotions so they don't go to the low, and the anxiety doesn't go to the low. And I've been working in that space.
So this is a setup podcast because in our next episode, we're going to be exploring a little bit about how you've walked through this. I'm going to put it as the most difficult journey of your life, but you can rephrase it. But I think I'm accurate from our conversations over and over. This has probably been the most difficult trial in your life. Is that a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, just add to, sorry, Sean, but before. So for many, many years, Johnny D is that much older than me where I would have I have 6 kids. He has
You're trying
3.
to beat him down more?
No. He has 3 boys, and I would glean from him constantly wisdom.
Yeah.
And highly competent, and, in all the circles that I traveled, had such great answers that were sprinkled with like maturity and godliness and all that. And also ready to tell me when he felt like God had a word, that God had given him a word, which happened frequently. And during this past 50-month period, that's been a complete shift. And to where I saw my buddy struggle with confidence, just any kind, getting up and functioning, and then also not knowing where God was at times. Like, where is he? He's silent. And me trying to minister to him and not having any answers. You had more answers than I did, Sean, but I was
real answers.
Just traveling with him with my presence and prayers and expressing love to him, but not. So it was a completely different relationship, completely different Johnny D in the sense of what he was going through.
Yeah.
I'm really blessed for those who are listening is that I did not have Job's experience of three of his friends coming and beating up on him. I had the complete opposite of that. I had compassion, empathy, no fixing, but just listening and then asking permission if they could make an observation or something that would be helpful. So I'm blessed that I didn't have to contend with people fixing or trying to find fault of where I went wrong.
Well, this is a very interesting something because the people that were in your life were the people you trained, meaning that you were probably one of the, if not the biggest, one of the biggest, but I think for many of us, the biggest influence in this arena of the journey of how to disciple or minister out of these things that we've done in recovery and these concepts of not fixing. And so you actually got to experience the fruit of your labors in earlier years, which is kind of a funny thing when you think about it now.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny D traveled with me not only through my cancer journey, but also my divorce journey and a drug addiction with one of my children journey. All those.
Yeah, before we leave, I mentioned it as an identity shift. Peter, you described a shift in relational capacity. I think that might be the right word I want to put it. Your relational capacity had changed. Your ability to carry other people's burdens had changed for this season, even in the way your role in your family. So if I could describe your family for a second, is you have three adult male children who are all three incredible high performance and deep guys. And your wife, Rita, an amazing woman. And prior to this, I think you were still the lion of the family. Mm-hmm. And now as you're in this phase, you can't play the role of a lion. And so how did that make you feel? How did that play out for you? Describe that as, having raised and conquered the business world, raised three incredible guys that, and I know that you won't take all the credit for, how they have turned out, that, there's a lot of gifting from God and they themselves have made their own choices and there's a lot to be said there, but, people came to you for wisdom and understanding and now, you're dependent. How did you process that part of the journey? Because that's a massive identity shift or relational role shift, at least for this period.
Yeah, I've never been asked that, nor have I kind of like gone down that road. But because of my involvement with 12-step recovery since '84, I raised my three sons with more listening and practicing the principles, particularly raising them. And it's funny you should say, but all these personality tests have my three sons as lions: lion beaver, lion otter, lion golden retriever. And I think a couple of them accepted it quicker than others. My oldest had probably the more difficult time of, maybe seeing his dad, in a different light. But I will say, Sean, that had to be about a year and a half ago where you had suggested the thought of me really opening up and coming clean with my sons of how painful the journey was. Because at that time, my wife was helping to shield and protect me from them seeing me at the worst. So I did take your advice, and I spoke to each one at length about the mental health issue that I was in, as going down, and needing their support, which all three of them unconditionally, responded with great love, and not going down the fixing mode, but going down the road that whatever needs to be done will be there for you. Just let us know what you need, but we'll pray for you. So I felt privileged to the fact that their support was behind me and that I could be honest with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. The journey of weakness. Such a tough journey, right? It's like to come from great strengths to a journey of weakness is such a tough journey. But then what I think I hear you describing as something that's a journey of love. Like you get to experience love, maybe like you haven't experienced from them before. Even I'm not sure, but in a way that and at least in a way you hadn't experienced before. So that's really
and also the being vulnerable with our children. I mean, obviously there's an age issue, but you had adult boys. As to just the tough emotions and the toughness and the difficulty you were going through. I always encourage people when they're going through cancer journeys to share their vulnerability with their family. And it's hard for cancer patients because they want to shield their family from the sadness, the anger, the fear that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And I get that. But I think that in my case, it was great to be able to share that stuff with my children. And I think my children appreciated the fact that their dad was being honest and authentic with them. And I saw you do that with your boys with this.
Yeah. And I guess I think sometimes mathematically, but probably I shared about 60% of what was going on with me, with my sons. Probably with my wife, maybe 90, because at 100% it would overwhelm her. So that's where, by the grace of God, I had both you, Peter, and Sean, and maybe one other that I was able to share everything, particularly in the areas of self-harm, when those thoughts came into my mind. And my counselor said that that's making a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And in that context of a permanent solution of self-harm to a temporary problem was very helpful for me to understand that I was not going to do that. And I had committed early on in the journey that no matter how painful it got, that I would not go down that road. And I used to remind God that you'd never test someone beyond their capabilities. And I trusted that. In Isaiah, it said that he would never break a bent reed or extinguish a flickering candle. And many times I felt like that bent reed and flickering candle. But there was always someone that God brought in that sustained me.
I was just thinking, we're going to finish this kind of introduction of this 50-month journey out here in a few seconds, and we're going to talk a little bit about in our next episode the things that you've learned and the tools and the things that are just helpful. And I think Peter and I both thought, hey, this is the journey you've described has so much parallel with someone who's on a cancer journey that there would be so much to relate to. Just from the change in identity to the journeying in powerlessness and weakness, and a journey that's out of your control. Sometimes, like the medical solutions, so far, you don't know that you have a cure right now. And you've been on journeys trying to find a medical solution, as well as I've watched you journey through the emotional and the spiritual aspects of this. And so this hasn't been a one-dimensional approach to this, and I think that's been good because so much of the time I think in our journeys when a complex situation comes, it's so easy to have somebody give you a simple solution. That's because that's so much of the time is to comfort ourselves. That's why we call it fixing. It's like, let me give you a one-dimensional fix. If you would just read this verse and recite it over and over, everything's going to be fine. And so I've given you what you need so I can feel better myself and go away. That's fixing, right? So just so we defined it again, as opposed to, I don't know what the answer is, but I'll journey with you in that. That's not fixing. That's what we call a term that is funny because since we started introducing this, getting kicked around here a lot, sitting in the dirt. Sitting in the dirt means a willingness to enter into somebody else's pain. And you can't perfectly do that, but if you can sit in somebody else's pain with them and absorb some of that pain, then there's great relational connection that takes place. And notice I didn't say healing of whatever that thing is that is that's been oppressing, because I don't have I'm human. But I think there is a level of healing that takes place in our emotional and soul and connection space that is happening when we sit in the dirt. That is something that we can engage on, right? But it only comes by sitting in the dirt and being deeply connected. I guess what I was hoping maybe to close out this episode before we talk about learnings is maybe what's the big one aha that you might share with our group? Because we'll end for a week on this as you've gone through this 50 months. I asked you this question earlier, so I think you have something there. But what's the aha you'd love to share with us as we close this episode out, and the big learning that you feel like you're at today that you'd want to share with our listeners before we take on the broader space of learnings?
Well, in the Serenity Prayer, it said hardship is the pathway to peace. That's become a real reality. During the downtime of acute anxiety and depression, when I would come out of it, my level of experiencing life and living and appreciating of when it lifted, more of the nuances, particularly of my wife, of how she cared for me during these down parts, to be able to then really understand the magnitude of having a 58. This year we'll be married 58 years, and so the big aha was really learning that how to enjoy the moment and appreciate, and really fall in love again with not only with my wife, but also with my friends.
I just want to end it or add this to our ending, right? Because this is the ending.
It can be a longer ending, yeah. I even had something that hit my mind, so I'm interested in what you have
I think this latter part, this like last season of Johnny D's journey, so for this whole 50 months, he has felt, I believe, powerless, like he had no control over what was going on. And I think control is a big issue in the recovery space, but also in my own personal cancer journey. I understand I have no control over like people and circumstances and my health journey and all that, but I do have control over how I'm going to respond. And Johnny D has a bunch of tools that he's learned with this training that he received at Danbury Hospital. And I think there's some tools that he could share in the next, session, the next episode that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to share.
And that's kind of, that's good. I think that's really important because that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about. I think it's more than just tools too. I think there's perspective, but one of the things that stuck out to me, because we were introducing the journey and something recently happened that was kind of at the end of your journey here, is that you just recently moved.
Yes.
this place of stability on the lake is a place that you left. And the thing that fascinated me about this was that you moved in the middle of the storm, and meaning that even I think on move date you were going through one of the down cycles, if I'm right about this, and that you actually had to walk through leaving this place that had such deep meaning to you and connection, interactions with your grandkids, so forth. In this, it was just a wonderful place you guys had there to moving, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up is that you had also just been through the tools, the connection on tools, and learning how to walk in the moment was a big part of that. And maybe that's the question coming back, thinking about that was that a gift at the right time to be able to make such a big transition at that time, having been given the right tools, the right gifts at the right time to be able to even make this move, which is just a necessary part of your journey.
Yeah. That's one is a great observation, and God's timing is perfect. And I started the program called Dialectical Behavior Treatment on December 16th. And it was a 30-day program, and we moved on January 30th. So between early December and January, it was tearing everything apart, particularly my basement, which I made it like a kid's wonderland. So in the height of the depression and anxiety, I was doing things. The program, one of the tools is opposite action, which what your emotions are telling you, do the opposite of. So when my emotions in the depression was stay in bed, put the blankets over your head, or run away, the opposite action would be do the things you have to do, even though they're you don't have the energy, you do what you can do. So yes, the program was a gift and came at the right time to make a transition from living on a lake for 17 years to moving towards a small condominium.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight that because it's part of your story coming into this.
And you painted the picture, Sean. It was good of Johnny D was such a high-performing, high-achieving, very visible guy in every realm, and now he's had all these limitations placed on him, and so how has he accepted those limits? And it's been a journey to watch it. Acceptance, radical acceptance, things like that. Johnny D's going to talk about that.
The gift of limits is going to get talked about in our next episode also.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, John, for sharing just this part of the stories. I'm sure for some of us, and myself, there's a level of weight of hearing the story again, and I'm guessing you might even feel it just experiencing that, just the thoughts about that. And but I just want to say thanks for sharing this story, because I think this is real life. Like the people that are listening to this podcast and the people that are going through a cancer journey are likely also walking through a really weighty story. And so my hope is that in our next episode that it'll have a little bit more upbeat in one sense of this, that there's something there to be shared of the beauty, the learnings, the growth, the opportunities. And so we're going to dive into that for next time. But thanks for being willing to walk through this difficult part because it is meaningful. It's like that storyline that you have right now is deeply meaningful, and to be able to hear it and to be able to share in that is to me just it's very connecting. So I just wanted to say thanks, and I know Peter, you feel the same way.
Unbelievable. Love you, buddy.
So
thank you. I love you guys.
Thanks for sharing. So that's all for today, and we'll see you next time.